Yep.
And welcome everybody to another episode of the Glamour Prism Podcast, your Final Fantasy XIV fashion focused podcast. We have pretty special guests on the show today. We have Kaiyoko Star. So
Hello.
why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to everybody, Kayoko?
I'm Kyoko Star on Sargatanis. I am the fashion reporter that handles most of the infographics and such. I've been a longtime member in the Final Fantasy XIV community since the 1.0 alpha, and like taking screenshots in the general fashion of Final Fantasy XIV, and I also do like rating and various other things in the community.
Right, right. So of course I had to get the fashion report guy. You know, what would a fashion podcast be without the fashion report guy? So
Right.
so I wanted to talk to you and just kind of see like, you know, how you got into the whole fashion report thing and like what you do to your whole like technique that you do to figure out the items every week and so I was interested to see you know how that all works for you and then we're also gonna touch a little bit on the patch 4.5, go into some of the story spoilers and stuff. So if you guys haven't seen this haven't done the main scenario yet, probably want to avoid that part of the podcast, but you know, um, and then we'll talk about pretty much all the stuff. So, but anyways, the first thing I wanted to ask you about is the fashion report. So yeah, if you could talk a little bit about how you got started in doing it because you've been doing it for a while now, and
Almost a year.
yeah, yeah. And so did you expect to be going this long with it and gotten to be as big as you are now with the fashion report?
I honestly had no idea going into it. Like, I actually, the first week, I kind of just took it really casually because I was rating really hardcore at the time. So it came out in, I believe it was 4.2, which was when Sigmascape released. And I used to be like an alarm clock raider. So I'd wake up at like the second the patch comes up and go just like absolutely crazy and stuff and getting it as far as we could as soon as possible. But
Right.
that so I did the very first week. I just kind of got the 80-point score, and or like the not very high score. But every week after that, I don't know I don't remember exactly what happened, but just I started picking up on doing it very quickly, and I have a lot of characters, so I could figure out the dies very easily myself without having to have the assistance kind of from other people. And I think I got known at first pretty much by figuring out like the dies first before anyone else, and I basically stocked up on every single die in the game on my between all my alts, so I could just like spam them and kind of in an order to know what to kind of figure out at the time. Um, but fashion reports drastically changed since that time because that was like the early days when you had to have like almost every single slot filled, every single slot died to even get 100,
Yeah.
and that's not anywhere near what it is anymore. So I kind of go a little bit differently with it.
Right.
Um,
It's a little bit more casual now than it initially was, right?
yeah. So what ended up happening was I was originally just keeping track of it on my Twitter account through like text and a picture, like of showing like, okay, here's 100, and I'd like source out of whoever else figured out the 100 or something else first. And so what ended up happening was I was like, okay, this looks like crap though every single week. I want something that looks nicer and people can see and read very quickly. It's very friendly for Twitter and phone and like widescreen format. So I just was like, okay, I'm gonna make this infographic that's widescreen ratio based and try and pretty it up and make it look like the fashion report, and that was kind of a spawned out of what it is now, of the infographics every single week. And I originally wasn't taking care of like the Reddit threads or anything like that, but that's also something that's kind of grown over time. It's like I kind of just gradually took over the whole, that aspect of it on Reddit, of reporting it and everything like that. So
Yeah.
there was a lot of assistance for obviously the community and managing the thread and all that kind of stuff. And it's like it's not just me doing it. So that's one thing that I don't know how to source everyone else that obviously puts in work into it. There are multiple people who do so, and there's I don't know how to pronounce this guy's name. It's like Gosu something, and then there's Lucky Duck on Reddit, and then there's also the person who does the dyes. Let me remember their name. It's Ryan Ultimius. So they pretty much took over the dye kind of thing that I used to do, because pretty much what I do now is, because I've done it for so long, it eventually got kind of exhausting.
Right. Yeah, I was
doing
wondering
it,
if that was the case, if you're still just figuring out everything yourself. But
no,
it sounds
it's
like you have some help now, which is pretty nice.
so the 100 is very easy to figure out myself based on the hints. What happens is where a lot of the community feedback, I guess, kind of comes from now, and I try to like I have like two versions of the fashion report now. It's like this 100 one that I spit out just quickly as possible, and I have everything basically formatted and saved. So all I have to do is write in the icons and all like the text and stuff on there, um, and put in a picture on the picture. But with like, for example, like the detailed one, that one takes a very long time to like put together. It takes probably like an hour to like an hour and a half every week,
Right.
and that requires a lot of community feedback to kind of build that thing, and that's a lot more where I rely on everyone else. There are times where I can't figure it out kind of myself, and I do. It is very helpful from the community, and like a lot of people can figure out stuff that's a lot cheaper and stuff quicker than I can, and I try and like credit people where I can. Obviously, a lot of people in the community are, that do it every week, which is very nice. Like there's a lot of familiar names. Like I said, there was like Lucky Duck, the Rion Altimius. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. And then there's also Go S. I can't pronounce his name. It's Go Essening or something like that.
Right. Right. I'm sure if he's listening, he knows what you mean.
Yeah.
So, so that's good, so everybody kind of works together, and so you just kind of, compile all the information and make it into a way that's easy to digest for people. So that's
the main thing I try and do is make it very visually friendly, very quick to read, and because it is, I've gotten lots of feedback that it's very difficult to be pointed to that Reddit thread if you want multiple options and like try and figure it out, or like people just don't go to Reddit, and I use my Twitter a lot. My Twitter is pretty much my primary thing. Like Reddit is pretty much the gathering resource, and then I will also put like an infographic up on Reddit, but my Twitter is pretty much my primary, like this is where I'm sending out the final product from, and like this is where you should look if you want like one of the 100 resources.
awesome. So the whole fashion report thing just sort of happened, and it wasn't really ever planned, and you just kind of keep on doing it, just to keep it going, huh?
Yeah, and the thing was is like early on when the dyes were required, it was extremely expensive to get 100s, and I fortunately have a nice amount of kill that that I that I don't think other people are willing to kind of spend for that kind of thing.
Right.
At least out of the people that I know that have that kind of skill, like because you got to buy premium dyes every week, like, or I'd have like I'd use my choco gold feathers because I have tons of those things because of like getting people to join the game or whatever. Like I you get 5 of them per gold feather, or whatever dye you want. But like that was kind of my way of just doing things because I wanted to make sure that I was getting the correct information to people, I guess. And it was easy for me to kind of do with what I had.
Well, I'm sure everyone appreciates all your hard work every week because I know me personally, I'm always looking for that Miss Kayoko's fashion report every week to get my 100%.
Yeah.
So we do definitely appreciate your work there. So so I mean, is it something you enjoy doing, or do you find it to be kind of work, or you know?
So it sometimes it's work and sometimes it's not. It depends on how long it takes to make it. Um, if if it's a week where there's a lot of options, that turns into a lot more work for me. And I try and make sure that it still gets out, but I like doing the original 100 posts, but I want to make sure people are getting the information. So I think to a degree it's always going to feel a little bit worky, but it's not. It's something I enjoy doing regardless of it feeling like work because I don't know. I just I don't mind it. I guess even if it does feel like work, because a lot of things I will say this for me, a lot of Final Fantasy 14 is work to me beyond just it being fun, because I spend a lot of time with it. So it does sometimes I turn some of my like play style into like a work fashion. I want to say.
Yeah, I definitely can understand that, especially with the hardcore rating aspect of things. Sometimes it can definitely feel like a lot of work.
Yeah.
So, and I know just because I'm also from Sargatana, so I know what free company you're in and everything. So,
Mhm.
that's definitely one of the more hardcore free companies on the server. So,
I'd say we've kind of not held that. I'd say there's other ones now that are a little bit, quite a bit more hardcore now. We were definitely back in the 2.0, 3.0 era, but I'd say now that's probably not the.
I mean, you guys are usually at least clearing like week one Savage, so so that's hardcore in
Mhm.
my mind.
Sorry, that's changed since recently because my static actually had disbanded that was doing that. We ended up just it ended up being a thing where we just ended up being done because we had been running since 2.0 at the very beginning, you know.
Right,
Like
right,
that's an extremely long time for a static, and it just eventually it just people saw it differently and they wanted to do in the game and all that kind of stuff, and we just kind of had a split.
it was
Yep.
just time.
Yep.
So, all right.
6 years though, pretty crazy.
Yeah, right,
Well,
right,
five
right,
or 6 years, whatever you want to call
right,
it.
right. So, so that's interesting. So you're moving on to new things for 5.0, you think? Maybe new static or what do you think?
Yeah, I want to still keep doing that hardcore rating nature. I just don't know if it's going to be at the exact same capacity. I think my main thing as far as rating goes for me is I really enjoyed doing the ultimates. Like the same thing goes with like the fashion report or like glamour or anything for me. It's like I try and dedicate a lot of time to making sure everything's quality. I don't I if I can't do something at a specific level, I generally avoid doing it. And this goes a lot even for like when I was G posing and stuff. Like if I wasn't keeping up a certain quality, I wasn't happy with it.
Right.
Um,
I can
and
understand that myself. If
like
I'll spend a lot of time just, trying to take pictures and stuff, and if you're just not getting that picture you want, you end up just deleting hours worth of work, and just
yeah,
ending up
exactly.
back at zero,
Yep. I, I guess I just everything I do in the game, I've always applied like that kind of mindset to. Like I unfortunately don't want to say I don't like saying it this way, but like I don't think I can take the game casually personally. It's just the way my mindset is. Like
Right,
everything I feel like I have to give my 100% to.
right. Well, that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's completely fine, and I'm sure a lot of people are like that as well. They
Mhm.
they take pride in and you know, achieving a certain level of quality, like you were saying,
Yeah.
and being able to maintain that is probably something that people, you know, enjoy about themselves, you know. So and
It can be very taxing.
right, right. But it's usually worth it in the end, right? You know, because you're getting something out of it yourself, and a feeling of
There's a level.
satisfaction when it comes out right, you know.
Yeah, definitely a level of satisfaction is what I'd say.
So so that's cool. So yeah, so on the topic of new things here, um, I'd like to kind of, you know, just sort of get your thoughts on some of the new content that's come out in the past week or so.
Sure.
We've had patch 4.5 drop, so we've had some new story. We got the new 24-man raid. You know, we got a new trial, and we got Blue Mage. So
Yep,
I
I'm all
think
about the blue mage.
I think I think the first thing I'd be interested to hear about from you is your thoughts on the trial. Did you uh, did you have a chance to do that at all, or
Yes, I have had a chance to do it.
it was pretty easy, right?
It's too easy in my opinion.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, so you know, it's all relative, right? It's all relative in how much difficult content you actually consume. I've been doing some
Right.
savage raiding this expansion. I didn't really do much in Heavensward, but I have been raiding in Stormblood,
Mhm.
and I cleared every single trial except for Shinryu, just because I
Right.
didn't really try too hard because it wasn't really too relevant for me at the time.
I
And
would argue that that's probably one of the harder ones too.
yeah,
So
yeah. It's
at current relevancy, like now it's probably a pushover if you went back and did it, but
right.
just because of like outgearing it and all that. But
Yeah. But yeah, I definitely felt like Seiryu was a little bit lower on the difficulty curve for me. Like
yep.
the mechanics of it just, you know, it just it all clicked really fast for me. Like I want to say within like 3 pulls I was already on Enrage, so
Yeah.
it wasn't like too hard to understand any of the mechanics or too hard to execute anything. So and
That there's definitely a stark contrast with like the Four Lords. Like the Four Lords seem much more straightforward and like very easy to tell what mechanic is coming next. It's just you have to observe it. Whereas like there's not so much cryptic stuff to it. Like there's been a lot of cryptic stuff sometimes in the past, like with older primals. So I would say that that is definitely I'd say it's definitely on the easier side, and a lot of the Four Lords have been.
would you say that lowering the difficulty and making it more accessible for people, would you say that's necessarily a good thing, or do you think that the extreme primal should, you know, maintain a certain higher difficulty than, you know, the average
Um,
content?
so when it comes to trials, I look at them. I want something that's how do I say this? I want something that's cinematic. Because it's a one-shot fight and it's involved with that. It's like it's not like part of this overlying story. Like I like how if something's very cinematic and stuff like that. But as far as difficult, like and those ones have pretty much done that. There's been like that. But the problem for me is you have with the difficulty is when you're at the end of the expansion, I expect a lot more out of a player because you've had the whole entire expansion to kind of grow. So the last primal not being difficult is questionable to me, because of its positioning. I really think at the beginning of the expansion they should give the easiest primals and it kind of grows over time. And they kind of did that with Susano. I didn't think it was that difficult. It was it's definitely one of the easier primals, but Lakshmi I think is a little bit more difficult for people. And I thought that was fine to have that contrast right there. And then Shinryu is like the Shinryu and I think Shinryu and Tsukunomi are probably the two harder ones out of it. So it's positioned weirdly because those are like off primal, like if they're off primal. So Byakko and Suzaku are like on primals that are on like raid patches, where I'm fine with those ones maybe being a little bit easier, but I expect I guess a little bit more out of these middle ones or like the ones that are getting towards the end more of the expansion because it's supposed to fill your time up a little bit more. And I think giving something a little bit more difficult makes the player grow. And its positioning is very awkward for it being so easy, I guess, for me.
Yeah, I think what Square Enix is trying to achieve with Primals, honestly, is having it be like a gap closer to being able to clear more difficult content. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
you're getting somewhere in between, like, the previous tier difficulty and the current tier difficulty. So if you're struggling with the current raid to finish it or whatever, the primal is like something that is not quite as challenging as the final raid, but maybe somewhere in between, so that if you are struggling, you can clear that primal and maybe get a weapon upgrade to help you push through that final raid encounter. And I think
And
Suryu is definitely that. So,
I definitely agree that might be the case of how they're envisioning it. I just, on my end, as like a long term player, I look at these things as like, I think a player should grow over the course of an expansion if they like started it, and I don't really feel like Seiryu promotes that. It's more my concern with it.
yeah, it's definitely
I do understand the catch up mechanic part of it.
right.
In my mind, I guess I look at some other things as also being catch up mechanics, so I don't know if that's necessarily the best use of it. But for me, I guess it's not so much relevant because this is kind of also in my downtime because like I don't mind having like a patch that's like a downtime up into expansion because it's like this is a little bit of a relaxing period. I just for the health of like player growth, I that's more where I question it, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah, and I think that you know, there's a certain like group of people that, you know, like extreme trials is going to be as much as they do, you know what I mean?
Right.
And they're never going to go further than that. So,
Hmm.
it's sort of content for those like mid-range people
Yeah.
to enjoy.
Yeah.
So, and I do think that's kind of how they develop content as well, is they sort of target different audiences with their content. Um, so not every piece of content is necessarily going to be enjoyed by everyone. You know what I mean?
Definitely. I'm
So
not gonna say I don't enjoy it though. Coming from my background, it's because I'm gonna farm it for like the dog and stuff like that. Um, it more just comes down to is like I said, it's I'm looking at the big picture of the game sometimes when I like see content, and that's more where I'm like questioning it. Uh, I don't so much look at things as like this is bad because it's a catch up mechanic and it's easy for people. It's more of I wonder how it impacts the overall like well being of the player base and how the player base in general sees it, and seeing that so many people find it easy, include just I haven't seen like someone say it's hard. It that maybe I'm just not encountering those people, and that's maybe where I more question it at its positioning, if that makes sense,
right.
on difficulty scale.
So yeah, and then too, there's a perspective of people like me as well, where you know you're kind of pick and choose content
Mhm.
based on the rewards and based on the appearance of items.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
that's definitely my my main motivator is how good does the item look, and how what kind of gear sets are in there that I can potentially go after for glamour and stuff. So and
That is that is also one of my primary motivating factors, just because of glamour and stuff like that too, for a lot
right,
of content.
right.
I
So
like back in 4.1, I spammed Scala a lot for the whole entire set,
oh,
like
me too,
because
me
of
too.
every. I had to have the full Scala set, so eh, definitely that's a massive motivating factor. Like the Dark Knight sword from Seiryu is really cool because it has that whip effect and all that kind of stuff to it.
Yep, yep. Yeah, I was going for that too with my first couple of books there, or totems, I should say.
Mm.
Um, but I managed to get like my main summoner, so I managed to get my book from a drop, so I didn't have to use my totems on that,
Nice.
and then I kept farming, and then managed to get my Dark Knight sword from my 10 totems, so it worked out pretty nicely for me.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, the Suryu stuff does look pretty good. Like you said, the Dark Knight sword's one of my favorites too. The thing that always gets me though is I always think when the weapons first come out, man, I wish that glow was already there. Because it's going to happen. It's going to be like crafted later on, glamour in the next expansion or whatever. Because that's seems to be the trend they're doing. They just recently came out with the Sophia crafted
Yeah.
weapons,
And
which
assuming Zervan will be the next one as soon as I'm assuming 5.0 comes out, they'll release at the same time.
yeah. So, and with what we were talking about earlier with the difficulty wise, I was thinking that, maybe what they ought to do is just have like another difficulty level, so you can have that kind of in between difficulty, and then maybe have like the glowy version be the hardest difficulty. You know what I mean?
Mm,
And just have that as um, something extra for the hardcore people. You know what I
I
mean?
wouldn't I wouldn't mind that if it's my biggest concern with something like that is how much development time they invest into something like that, creating another difficulty mode. I think that's really um it's not as easy to balance unless you're just scaling it purely based on stats and say like if they took the exact same fight and they just like, scaled up the damage and all that kind of stuff. Okay, that's fine. And then it's a little bit more taxing, and if for something like that, that's perfectly fine. I wouldn't mind that to have like the extra glow on there, um, but or maybe like on top of that maybe a higher percentage chance of like the dog or something.
Right.
Uh,
Have you are you familiar with WoW's Mythic Plus at
I
all?
I am familiar with it, and I how it like adds different like um mechanics into it. Based there's like a random assortment of mechanics, and like get different keys, and you just kind of build upon those keys, and like it changes kind of as you go, right?
Yeah, like basically what it is it's it's the difficulty keeps scaling up, and
Yep.
it keeps going up and up every time you clear. So I was, that's something that gets quoted a lot as being content that people would be interested in seeing for
I,
14. And
I would. Sorry. Go ahead.
I think that, you know, they do they could definitely use something like that. I'm not sure exactly how they would implement it exactly. Like, obviously Mythic Plus is a dungeon feature. So, and people have been also asking for more difficult 4-man content, and Mythic Plus is usually what comes up as an example of that. So, but something maybe um, for primals as well. They could scale up the difficulty with some sort of random mechanics or whatever, you know, to kind of change things up a bit, you know,
Mhm.
change the formula a little bit and have a little bit something extra without too much extra development time. I think would
I
be interesting to see.
I would definitely like to see Mythic Plus added into dungeons, and if it could be applied to trials, I definitely like to see it. I don't. I think it's definitely possible to do. My if it was made the same way, how you kind of have like that Mythic Plus key. I don't know how this interacts with like. I don't think you can have like random people joining you though in Mythic Plus. You have to have like kind of matching up the keys or something, from my understanding. So I don't know if that would create difficulties in the party finder. That'd be my biggest concern, is like, because a lot of this content that they make, it tends to be very easy to implement, and where anyone can join at the time, as long as you're meeting like the bare minimum requirements, or whatever the party finder sets the requirement to. So I don't know how that would work necessarily with the key, but I think that's an interesting way to add, like you said, the glow, or like making more rewards available per fight. um, I my only concern, I guess, I think a lot of people look forward to the glowy stuff though as a crafter, and that's kind of taking another piece away from them. Would be my only concern with doing something like that. But obviously, the content would be enjoyable more to more people. I think with something like that. I just glamour wise, it makes sense, but it also takes away from someone else. So it's always, it's kind of like a win lose, like where are you distributing this reward from,
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they necessarily need to take away the crafting aspect of it, you know. I mean, because the way you get the way you craft it is you need a drop from the trial itself. So, you know, they could just have that drop be in the higher difficulty mode.
Oh,
You
okay,
know what I
sorry, I
mean?
thought you were meaning like the actual weapon itself drop. Yeah, that makes sense. Like maybe like the higher difficulty have a high chance of dropping like that item, like it scales up higher along with the dog, and then you could at any difficulty get the weapon kind of like, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, something like that. You know, just to give it a little bit more of an incentive, you know, to go to that next level. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
So yeah, but in general, you know, I just think that um, you know they could do more to extend the life of certain content, and you know, trials is one of those things that you know you kind of do it and then you're done with it. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
I'm not the type of person that'll sit there and farm out 99 totems on launch or whatever. You know, so
I've done that. So
so
I it's not fun. See, that's where I was talking about earlier. It's the work thing. It's like I turn it into work and I make it not fun, and I don't think that's enjoyable to everyone else. And I honestly don't actually like the current system for getting dogs because of that reason, because it like preys upon people like me, is how I
right,
look at
right. Well, you know, at least you have that feeling that you're working towards something,
it. True.
whereas before it was like you could do, you know, 200 runs and still never get them out, you know what I mean? So
Yeah,
so at least it's a little more forgiving these days, which I think is a good thing.
that is true. Yes, that is true.
So so anyways, moving on here, we talked a lot about Siriu. Um, I want to get into kind of like talk about some of the story stuff that we learned.
Mhm.
Did you go through the main story at all? Did you read all the stuff, or did you kind of like
I
skip
I
over everything?
I went through the whole thing, and I that was the very first thing I did
Uh,
because I didn't want to be spoiled.
Yeah. So that's what I was kind of curious. Are you the type of person that is fully invested in the story and reads all the dialogue, or do you just kind of like blaze through and skim over and
So it depends on what's going on. So if an expansion had just released and we're needing to level, I skip every single cutscene because I want to level as soon as possible and get to cap. But that's also why I have two characters. So, or I'm sorry, I have more than two characters. I have multiple characters. So on my second sit through, I will sit there and watch every single cutscene and read through it. My initial, I know this is backwards and some people wouldn't like this. My desire is to get to content quickly as possible because I just want to see it. I don't need the story necessarily to enjoy the content. Um, I I do enjoy the story when there's certain times I question the story. I'm like, what the heck, kind of thing, because I don't like their decisions in some things and how they've executed it, which we can talk about with this particular one.
Right.
But I
Yeah,
I
I've got some
generally
thoughts on certain dialogue that happened.
y- yeah I I don't like I don't like spamming, and I don't like skipping cutscenes unless it blocks my content. So if there's something that blocks content, I will not read it, and I will get through that quickly as possible. So in outside of, I guess, a story dungeon doesn't bother me, but if it's something like I said, raid wise or uh, leveling to cap so I can do other pieces of content, that's kind of where I skip it. I think generally the story is what makes me to a degree want to play this game over some other games. Specifically WoW, I have played WoW in the past, and that was mostly due to the raiding scene. But WoW doesn't look pretty to me. I want to play a game that looks pretty and has story and all this
That's
other stuff and
that's
feels
what
very Final Fantasy.
everybody says that, man. Like they like WoW, the game's great, but they can't play it because the graphics suck.
I I have not played WoW recently, and I've heard a lot of bad things about it recently, so I don't know if that's necessarily the case anymore. But
Yeah, it's definitely not the game it used to be. I'll tell you that.
I was Burning Crusade to Cataclysm player, and I did dabble a little bit in Mists of Pandaria, but I generally enjoyed the BC to Wrath of the Lich King period, and they did. I think they did a good job in like still adding story elements there, but the game just it never attaches me the way that 14 and or 11 attached me, because I did play 11 a lot. And even though 11 isn't the prettiest game nowadays, I think at the time they did a fairly nice job of it with like gear sets and stuff like that. Uh, and the characters were nice. I mean, there's always nice. It's always nice when there's cat girls too. That has a massive draw for me.
So so on that topic, do you are you gonna stay as a cat girl for 5.0, or are you
I
looking at those Vieras,
I
man?
I have never Fantasia'd, and I
Never.
will never Fantasia. I will never play a different character. This is
Yeah.
why I'm very attached to this character, I guess. The only way I would Fantasia, I guess, is to add features if they had eventually added like additional customizations. But I figure they're gonna if they add ever additional customizations, they'll do that. I have changed my hairstyle, but it was just to an upgraded ponytail or stuff like that. It's never something like drastic, like completely changing my face structure or something like that. Or it's always like it's very small little adjustments.
Right, right.
I still have, like I said, I have every Fantasia still that I've ever had for like free ones.
So that's good. So, um, yeah, I'm interested to see how the Viera turn out, but I probably won't change either. I'm pretty
Mhm.
attached to my character now as well.
Yeah.
I did I initially started out 2.0 as a Makote as well, and then once those Aura came out, man, I couldn't resist them.
My ult was a
They were a little bit more my aesthetic with the whole
mm,
like you know um, reptilian tails and things like that. So
my main ult is an Aura, and I agree definitely. Like it's nice to have that variety of like that. I do like Aura as my like second choice in right now, but I need to see how tall Veer are, because I don't. That's the one thing I know. A lot of other people like tall. Some people like taller races. It's just I prefer to play like not the tall. I don't want to be. I don't want to be a Lalfell, but I don't want to be the tallest race either. It's just that's kind of how I pick my characters. Like if they had like a small the like there's like a white bunny kind of version of from like Final Fantasy Tactics or like the advanced tactics or something. I think there's like a shorter version of Viera. Like if they had that as an option, like I would definitely consider switching my alt to that. But uh if I'm not a person for like big tall bulky figure or characters, and it's not that they're bulky necessarily, it's just they're tall. It's just not my thing generally.
Yeah, they're not as cutesy as the Makote, I guess, right? So,
Yes, and the Aura still fits that kind of like to me. So
right,
it's just that category.
the whole weeaboo waifu vibe. Right. So
Yes, kind of.
gotta have that. Gotta have that. So anyways, so yeah, so I want to talk a little bit about the actual story itself,
Yep.
if we can. So the story, we're trying to figure out what's going on with our Scion friends here. They're all getting their bodies knocked out, potentially. I have
They're
some.
locked behind the gates.
Right, right. We've got to throw wide those gates. So and we still haven't quite done that yet. There was definitely a cliffhanger at the end there, and we'll have to wait until the next story to see what's going to go on there. And I'm pretty sure,
Hmm.
we all have our theories of what's going on. So I'm curious, what do you think is exactly happening here with all the scions being knocked out?
I honestly want to say that this is just their way of explaining how the trust system's gonna work, and I know that sounds very like bad way of saying it. Maybe I don't know if that's the correct way of saying it. I think they're gonna allude to somehow through the main scenario how the trust system that they're building. Because if you look at like at FanFest when they were like, these are your trust NPCs, that it was the exact same NPCs on like they're showing it across like all the ones that like kind of like got knocked out.
Yeah.
And I think I honestly believe that is something to do it, and they're just gonna come back at the end, and I'm skeptical, I guess, on this thing, and I know that sounds really bad, but I think they'll like have us do whatever they've had happen very temporarily, and then we'll come back, and it's just to allow like events happening without the Warrior of Light basically being able to impact it, kind of thing.
Um.
I could be wrong.
So you're saying that the the scions will be kind of like in their own world, kind of thing, and
I think they might be being pulled. Their explanation is they're being pulled to whatever their minds are being they're either being pulled they're being pulled to whatever the world that the warriors of darkness are from, because that's what's speaking to them or something, or I it's really hard to tell right now, because for me when it comes to this, because I
it does sound
it
like it
sounds like
is our
Albert.
yeah,
Arbert.
Arbert, the Warrior of Darkness is
Yeah.
it definitely sounds like his voice who's talking to us.
And some people are saying that it's adult alpha node too, which it could, and then we have like time travel aspects because of like how the trailer show seemed like it was a very time travel-y aspect to it. It could be that too. It's if I didn't know about the trust thing, I wouldn't be skeptical. I guess is really what it is. Because sometimes SE likes to try and rationalize mechanics from the game as opposed to just being like, this just exists, and it kind of
Right.
screws up the story. So I don't want to. There's certain things in the story right now that are just making me a little skeptical about some things. It's not that I'm not. I'm still interested in the story. It's just that kind of thing maybe a little
So
skeptical, I guess.
so just to kind of elaborate on what you're saying, and I think we're kind of in agreement here. I'll tell you my theory, and I'll let you tell me what you think. So I kind of, like I said, I do think it is Arbert that's talking to us, the Warrior of Darkness. So,
Yeah.
and if you remember previously in the story, the Warrior of Darkness had come over from the first shard,
Hmm.
because their version of Heidelin was overwhelmed by the forces of light. Right?
Yeah, the flood of light.
They've gone. they were adventurers just like us, going through their quests, doing everything they're supposed to do, and light basically overtook their shard, and so they came to the source as the Warriors of Darkness
Yep.
to try to um,
Balance things.
right. They wanted to basically come here and put a stop to the Warrior of Light on the source in sort of a way of um, fixing things, I guess, for their they weren't able to save their own shard, so they wanted to come here and try to stop it from happening again, I guess,
Yep.
or something along those lines. And but anyway, so we ended up stopping them, you know, and basically we meet up with them at the Ethereal Sea, and we talk to Heidelin, and she says basically, "Oh, I'm so sorry for all this crap that happened to you guys, and I'm gonna absorb all the light from your shard and send you guys back there, and everything's gonna be great." So, so that happens. They get sent
Yes.
back to their shard, and
And
then
Mephilia gets sent with them.
and so now, um, you know, he's back, right? He's still in his shard, but he's somehow learned a way of communicating with us.
Yeah.
And it seems like he's trying to warn us that we're repeating his mistakes,
Yep.
basically. And if we don't stop that, there's going to be a flood of light for us as well, and we're going to end up in the same boat that they were in. So what I think is happening is, Arbert's calling all the scions over to his shard, and we're gonna have, he's trying to possibly get us to go over there to, you know, um, to take measures to prevent that flood of light from happening,
Yeah.
and
Because if it doesn't happen, he's worried that we're gonna have too strong of a force and we'll overpower whatever is happening here, like darkness wise, and then it creates the imbalance. So he's trying to um, even out, even out the playing field, so there's more of a balance between light and darkness in this case.
right. So that's what I think is happening. All the scions are going over to the first shard, and eventually we'll probably end up being called there as well.
Yep.
Um, and so the trust system, I think, is going to be um, happening over there. You know what I mean? Because they mentioned that you'll be able to use your trust NPCs for the main story quest in 5.0. So if the main story quest is happening over there, it would make sense that they're the only NPCs that you're allowed to use because they're the only ones that can even get there. You know what I mean?
I can do. I like. I have a little bit of a different view on this. I suspect that more of what it might be in my view is they're being pulled to like the ethereal realm where, but you know how Asians can like be existence in like the ethereal like realm, like they can go into inhabit bodies and all that kind of stuff.
Right, right, right.
I guess I'm suspecting it's more along those lines of like, uh, you can basically you will be able to travel to the other shard. Not like I'm not saying you're wrong in that, but like also you can also re-inhabit your own body within the shard that you're on. So like it'll basically give a way to your existence is kind of going is floating in the aether between like the shards or whatever how they explain it, and that the trust is inhabiting, like, so you can basically make copies of yourself in a way almost like upon different shards, if or is that kind of what you were getting at?
Right, right. So
Okay.
their bodies are obviously still here on the source,
Yeah.
right? Because we can see that they're all kind of like, in a coma,
Yeah.
and they're unconscious, but they're still alive, right? Their bodies are still alive.
Hmm.
So, which is kind of contrary to what we were told initially when the Warriors of Darkness came over. we were told that they had to basically sacrifice their lives in order to come over here, right? So it kind of gave us the impression that they were all dead, right? So, but I think
Um,
actually what's happening is, the soul is leaving the body, but
yeah,
it's the soul that's traveling. It's not the actual body itself. So
yeah.
when the soul arrives at the other um, shard, maybe they do inhabit another body. Maybe they take over, the bodies of the warriors of darkness, or something weird like that happens. But
Mhm.
I think it's also possible that they can just, exist as ether. They don't
Yeah,
necessarily need a body. You know what I mean?
yeah, and that's I guess where the trust system slash kind of thing is like being incorporated to me is like there that's just happening to the scions now in this case, or it's being taught to the scions how to do this thing. Um, and I on the thing about them having to sacrifice themselves, maybe what the case is because I believe what happened is Elidibus facilitated this for them to come to our shard. So maybe in the way that the Asians had to, or as an Asian, he had to make that happen. They did have to sacrifice themselves. But in the case of like say Hylidan interacting with this, having the interaction of taking them back, maybe that doesn't require the sacrifice. If you get what I mean?
I think also I recall that they each had their own crystal of light, and I think possibly that was how they were able to exist.
Possibly.
The crystal of light sort of gave them like a vessel to exist in. You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
So, um, so I think something similar could be happening for the scions as well.
True.
Possibly they'll be given crystals of light, and that's sort of like the physical um, container that they exist in while they're over
Hmm.
there. And maybe the warriors of darkness will have to like summon them or something. You know what I
So
mean?
are you suspecting then that the reason we are a warrior of darkness is because then we are on that plane or like that world that shard as opposed like the warrior of darkness version of the character is on in that shard specifically and not here?
I mean, I kind of feel like the whole warrior of darkness thing is going to be basically because um, there's an imbalance that's happening. Like
Hmm.
light has become too strong, and we have to counteract that with the forces of darkness somehow. And
Hmm.
maybe what that actually will entail, I'm not exactly sure. Maybe we'll get a crystal of darkness instead, or
Yeah.
something like that. And we'll have to build up bits energy.
Yeah.
Like if you recall in 2.0, we were basically strengthening our crystal of light the whole time,
Yep.
and uh, and I think we'll probably go through a similar process as the warrior of darkness.
That does seem like a trope that they use quite a bit. I mean, that's technically what they also did for Heaven's Ward in a way.
Right, right,
It was just you had to redo it
right,
again.
right. Midgard Stormer said, "Nope, you got to start over," and then
Yep.
he basically went through the whole process again. And I think we'll probably end up doing that again as the warrior of darkness this time.
Yep.
So, but yeah, um, so I think that's going to happen. I think there's definitely going to be some shard traveling happening in the expansion, which I'm looking forward to. I'm curious to see how similar the other shards are, if they are like exact copies of the source or if they're a little bit different. If do the Garleans exist there? Are all the city states still there?
Hmm.
How's that all gonna work out? Um, and then so that's going to be part of the expansion, I think. And then the other part is going to be our battle with the Asians and the Garleans, which
Hmm.
now we've learned are actually one and the same, right?
Yep.
But there do seem to be like two different factions within that whole dynamic. We have, the
It's
Garleans themselves, which,
it's a little messy.
yeah, to say the least. So we have Solus in his camp, which basically he's leading the Asians and kind of manipulating things behind the scenes in Garlemald,
Yep.
and then we have Varys, which seems on the surface to be in league with Solus and want to um,
That is, I think that is quite the confusion out of what happened in that particular cutscene. There's like two conflicting there's multiple conflicting cutscenes of like where he actually aligns, and it's not really straightforward. And I have some theories on what's actually happening, because he's being kind of
so
confusing.
do you think Varys was bullshitting the whole time? Do you
The
think
alliance or the
Do you think he? Yeah. Do you
ASEAN.
think he was telling? He think he was lying to the alliance, and basically that whole plan he said is just complete bullshit. What do you think?
So you know how they're gonna use the black, or he's producing the black rose, right?
Right. Right. Right.
So I think he knows that he he needs to make something dramatic change to make kind of this whole rejoining thing happen that he's alluding to like be able to defeat the ASEANs, or he has some plan to like make. I think he's doing something to fuck up basically like what Solus is wanting, or Solus is manipulating him in such a way that Solus knows he's tricking him into doing this. But I actually think so that he's going to use Black Rose on the Garleans, not actually the Alliance members, to like make the light imbalance, because he kept talking about like creating a calamity or something. Like, so I think the cause of the flood of light, or the potential cause of the flood of light, is the Garleans themselves being overthrown basically because the alliance is going to defeat them, kind of thing. Like, and it's like an unexpected victory, almost like, because the Black Rose. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah. So you might, everyone's probably initial assumption, and mine as well, was that there's going to be a showdown with Xenos, who, as we know, is being inhabited by Elidibus, and he's sort of like the emissary. That's his title. He's the Asian emissary, and
He's trying to keep the balance.
right.
From what I
So I think killing him will be the catalyst that causes the imbalance. But they're the lead up to that, there may be some sort of curveball in there that we're not seeing.
I definitely think there's got to be a curveball, because the way they handled this particular set of quests, although there is somewhat of a cliffhanger, I was kind of like, that's it, kind of thing.
Yeah,
I was expecting more.
yeah,
I
like they
just
didn't leave off at a very
we
good
know
place.
too much information almost, and it's like leaving us like questioning all this, and like I thought there was gonna be more stuff like going on, or we're gonna. It wasn't so much a cliffhanger. It was more of like, I know so much more, and I know what's supposed to happen, and this still hasn't happened yet, kind of thing.
Right,
You
right,
know?
right. Because we've seen that battle in the trailers and stuff,
Yeah.
and it just
Um.
so we know
And there's
what's coming.
right, but I on the Elidibus thing, how you were talking, I wonder if maybe it's not even that we attack him, but like, or you know how Xenos is well, we think Xenos is this elven, right? Right now,
Right,
he's
right,
inhabiting this elven's body.
right.
It could always be a case of he's the one who actually kills Elidibus in his own body, because he's like, that's his, like, you know how he has his like the ultimate hunt. He's like, now he's hunting himself almost, or like, you know what I mean? Like, and he ends up, because he does have this like form of echo. He could be the one that's like also the catalyst, like by killing Elidibus. Maybe Elidibus is trying to reason with us that create his, since he's like the emissary, to create the balance or something. From my understanding, is like that's the catalyst. How kind of you're saying?
Right.
Like
Right.
Elidibus might be the catalyst, but I mean, there's lots of things going on here that like I guess I'm not too clear on because like what like I want to know what the deal is with the Black Rose because
Right.
and how that also impacts this like because I could definitely see Elidibus being killed, breaking the balance and causing this flood or whatever happens that like could lead to a flood.
Right. There's definitely a lot of pieces in motion, and there's a lot of different ways it could go. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of possibilities right now. Um, you know, what
I think
what
they're purposely causing confusion right
right,
now with
right,
this particular section of the story, like specifically with Varys, because a lot of people are alluding like Varys may like be a traitor to the Garleans initially, and there's a lot of or like he was gonna be kind of like how he was now, but like it's really difficult because like you see him have this like detest for Solus right now, in like the Garlean cutscenes, but other part and then like in the alliance thing he's like he knows that this is going on and he's like professes it kind of to them and they're just like what the hell, you know, this is going on, like why are you allowing this? I don't know. It's just
I do have another thought too as well. Do you think that Varys might actually be like a Griffin type character, and have him actually be like part of the events that lead into 5.0, but then end up getting killed off before anything even happens?
well
Like,
that's where I'm saying with the Black Rose I think he ends up using it somehow on his own people, like that's part of it, like because he's like I don't like I'm so like he always talks about man's purity and all this kind of stuff of like he wants man to take over Asians. Well, like wouldn't the ultimate thing in his mind to be like to screw over the Asians is to completely ruin their plans by like using the Black Rose on their own people, like because Garleans were like the instrument of chaos kind of for Solus at this time, and so he detests Solus so much is that's why I look at he he is a he's going to use like the Garlean sacrificially the same way kind of how the Griffin used people sacrifice or used like the Alamingans that supported him along with I think he it somehow when he was doing that he also used some of the alliance members that were fighting as like to create Shinryu or whatever, you
right,
know.
right,
I guess I'm not sure, and that could even imply like this could be like the type of chaos being sown by Solus and Solus expects it, so he's being like being utilized to do something. I There's a lot of like ways you can go about this and twists and turns, you know.
right. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of things happening, and I can't wait to see the
Yeah,
conclusion and where it all goes.
yeah.
Um, so another little kind of teaser we were given about 5.0 as well was that actually at the end of the Ivalice raid.
Yep.
Did you see that cutscene at all?
Yeah, with the the guy the guy who looks like Gabarinth, and then there's the uh is it Tartarus?
Right, right. So I personally I'm not too familiar with all of the Ivalice lore, so I'm not sure. Is that a reference to Ivalice or
Gabarinth is the
I know
judge character that's like the
right. I know
kind of iconic figure.
he's from 12. He was a
Yes.
judge in 12. I know that
I,
part. I'm just
I
not
do not.
sure what Tartarus refers to.
So, there's some suspicion that Tartarus is It's Gates of Tartarus is like something from one of the other Final Fantasies. I can't remember exactly what it was. And it refers to like a gate to hell almost. So like a lot of people are wondering if it's related to a gate to hell, like either for the 8-man or 24-man raids. I believe is what they're associating it with.
Okay. Yeah,
I think that's what it is. I At least out of my understanding, but I think it refers from what I understand and I remember from like other Final Fantasy lore is it Gates of Tartarus. I don't know the character of Tartarus, and I know that character looks suspicious, so maybe someone knows that's a little bit more knowledgeable is like that's a familiar character, but uh, Tartarus generally I think ties to the gates of Tartarus, which leads to hell. So it might be like there's a lot of different types of hells, not like the Christian hell, but like I think it's like some Final Fantasy lore hell. That's what I've read about in lore stuff and heard from other people talking about it.
So we think it probably refers to a location, possibly a new raid or something.
Yeah, because I don't are they I've listened to Happy's podcast on this, and they were talking about it, and I don't know if in the cutscene they referred to something about drilling to the center of like Eorzea, or not Eorzea but Hylidan or something like that, with that like with the lighthouse or something. Maybe I'm misunderstanding what they were referring to, because I know there's something with the gates of Tartarus leading to hell, and I think there was something in the cutscene about going to like the center.
Okay. So
I don't know. Do you remember that cutscene that much? I didn't remember the dialogue in the cutscene. I just remember the characters and like.
I just remember
and
them commenting that they thought that technology was very similar to their own, and they thought that was interesting. And
Okay.
then there was the name drop of Tartarus.
Yeah.
So I was kind of thinking that maybe they're gonna like repurpose some of that stuff for, you know, their own to their own ends for some reason, you know.
Yeah, it could be alluding to, like I said,
it did kind of give me like vibes of when they discovered Ultima, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like there's something down there that they're gonna like dig up and use, you know?
Yeah. So the shit, I just lost my train of thought. I had like a elaborate thought on this, and I was remembering, and now I lost it. So
I'm sure it'll come back to you.
No, I remember now.
Okay.
So the Garleans started their technology is advancing more and more like throughout the story that we've been like watching. Like if you see a lot of like the different technologies that they've like incorporated, like as we've kind of progressed and seen like fights with Garleans, like they always get more advanced technology, so they're becoming more of Allagan like. So I think there's something alluding to the technology that was in that facility was also a descendant of Allagan, and I think this is like maybe the in between the Allagan and the Garleans. So I think there's some lore alluding to that the Garleans somehow came from the Allagans, and there's something missing in between. And I remember people talking about this from this particular cutscene. So I think that's the missing. I think that might be what this is in relation to.
Okay, that's interesting. So you think there's some sort of like missing link there between the Allagans and Garleans that might.
I think so.
And there, you know, there was some talk too as well that they are getting pretty close to the level of Allagan technology now, with being able to like use clones and things like that as well. Yeah.
Because Solus is now being technically cloned, and Zandu is being cloned from my understanding for Allagan.
Right. And then there was all of the clones of I can't remember that duo, the pair there.
Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. The people in the Allagan gear.
Right.
The high Allagan gear.
They were part of the Crystal Tower storyline.
Yeah. Like, and then a lot of the various characters that you see through, or the bosses or characters. And I know this is just a lazy excuse for them to just repurpose models, but that's a very Final Fantasy thing to do, is to repurpose models. But there is justification in the lore that these are clones, like various characters, like not just those two characters, because like if you look out of the monster models, there's also clones. Like it's like the last boss of the Temple of the Ancient, the the first raid tier, or the first 24 man, like the very last boss, that gets reused at other places too, and they like, I think there's something about it in the lore about how that's a clone as well.
Yeah, like there's trash mobs in subsequent
Yeah, yeah,
floors,
yeah, yeah.
which were bosses of previous tiers, and
Yes.
I think those were in story wise they were all clones.
Yep.
Um, so yeah, so definitely interested to see in 5.0, like, because if we do go to Garlemald, being able to see like what their city looks like and their technology and things like that. Um,
Yeah.
and and so hopefully we'll get some more insight on those things.
I'm
So
actually suspicious that it's not going to be Garlemald this expansion, and it may be another expansion away because of the map reveal from the 24 man.
right, so we got that like peninsula there where Dalmasca is located, and then
Yes.
in the bottom that we have Val9 was one of the locations revealed there as well.
Yeah, and just like some of the lore that they spoke about, like there's like a conflict there of like and how the Viera are coming from that location, and then I believe that tree village. There's something that was shown off at FanFest, or the tree area. I don't remember its name.
The
But
Raktika Greatwood.
yes, that one. Wasn't that talked about in the story somehow, from my understanding, or someone brought. I was reading into that, and or maybe I didn't read it myself straight through the story, but I remember someone talking about it.
I think they were saying that some of the Viera are located there, but then there's like
Okay.
another tribe that lives in the jungle, the Golmore jungle.
Okay.
That's the area that the Orban Monastery is located in.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to think of. I guess I was thinking that maybe that map reveal of that area, and they may tie that in with the expansion of uh, right there, as opposed to giving us another Evalician 24 man. It may be more of like, we're kind of alluding to, we're going to be going to this area, maybe, or like having something to do in this area for the expansion.
I think so. I mean, even if we don't get Garlemald proper, like the city itself, I think
Mm.
we probably should have at least a little bit more
The map.
of Ilsabard being revealed to us on that map.
Yeah.
Um,
I just I I wonder if that's a bit too much to put into the expansion, if they're going to potentially do this shard traveling that's being alluded to on top of it. You know what I mean?
yeah, I mean, I think that they could reveal all of Ilsabard and even have us go to Garlemald, but have
True.
my hunch is that if we do go to Garlemald, it'll simply be a dungeon like Alamigo was. So,
Yeah.
um, so you probably won't be able to actually go in the city itself, but you know, you'll be able
I
to sort of go there as a dungeon. You know what I mean?
mhm. Just the amount of like the map area up there, and it's very concerning of how they're gonna fit that all in expansion, is more where I'm like thinking in my head, because like I feel like that's maybe a lot of it's like wasteland and it doesn't really matter, but I feel like there's a lot of area they could cover that they just haven't shown off, that they could do really cool stuff with, and I would hate for them to try and stuff either too much into the expansion, and it not be quality, uh, or maybe they're capable, maybe they have the budget to make this big expansion and do all these things that they're wanting. It's just I
You know,
I
they could pull like
maybe they'll surprise us.
what they did with the Eorzea. You know, we had
Mhm.
all of Eorzea being revealed, but we weren't able to actually visit everywhere
True,
until
true.
Heavensward. You know what I mean?
No, definitely.
We had Ishgard locked off to us like ever since 1.0. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
they could reveal Ilsabard, but just have not all the zones be accessible yet. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and I mean, even with Stormblood, we still have regions of like Hingashi that are still inaccessible to us, and
That's true.
regions of Authard are still inaccessible. So, um, like we can't go to Nagsha, for example. Um,
Hmm.
and then there's also a region to the north of the burn that we don't have access to. Um,
Right.
so there's there's always the possibility. Um, I do kind of expect that area to be revealed. So if it's not revealed, I would be pretty surprised by that. So, um, but again, if we do go to another shard as well, like I'm sure that even though we're technically going to an entire new like planet per se,
Hmm.
I highly doubt that we'll have access to all the regions that we have access to on our
Right.
current planet. We'll probably be isolated to like a couple of zones there. You know what I
Right.
mean? So,
Unless they use the world travel system to make it make sense.
right,
It could just be that,
right,
right?
right. Um, I hope it's not that, but
I hope it's not either. I just like I said, I sometimes I'm very suspicious of them
right,
when they do this kind of stuff. Um, and to their to their benefit, they try and make it all make sense. To their detriment, sometimes they go a little bit too far with it. You know?
right, right. So, yeah. So we'll have to see what they do. Hopefully, we should get some more information here pretty soon. We do have the next Fan Fest coming up. It's only like 2 weeks away now, so that's good. Hopefully, we'll get some decent reveals there. And
Yes, we're
uh,
so close.
do you think we'll actually get like the second half of the trailer there? Like, do you think we'll actually get the reveal of where we're
I
going? Because we're not actually getting the next story part until after all the fan fests are completed, which kind of
I'm
makes me wonder how much can they really reveal in trailers. You know what I mean?
I'm actually worried they're gonna show off too much. Like, which is kind of disappointing. I wish they would have. This is why I was like kind of like that's it when we got the main scenario. You know,
Right.
like how you're saying, like how much more can they show off? Like
Without spoiling. You know what I mean?
right, and I think they did a decent job of just saying, hey, you're gonna become the warrior of the darkness. And I ever since Xeno came back, there's always or Elidibus being Xeno, like there's always been this suspicion in my head that we're gonna fight in a trial, actual proper trial with him, not him as Shinryu, or not him in a 4-man dungeon, because I felt like that was while it was while it was good to have like this thing you were chasing after all of Stormblood is like this is what you're building up to, getting stronger, getting stronger, getting stronger. Um, I felt like he was a little bit wasted, ultimately, and I was happy that he was back in a way, so you can cap off the expansion with him being
Right.
like the final trial kind of thing,
Hmm.
or like a Steps of Faith type of trial, or maybe it'll just be a solo instance. I don't know. We'll see. Um,
I think Xeno's story personally is probably going to continue all the way through 5.0. Like
really?
I do get the feeling like they're just building him up to be this huge villain, like the Sephiroth of frickin' Final Fantasy 14. You know what
No,
I mean?
I
Like,
definitely understand what you're saying. And I think they need that. I think it's always good to have a they've been doing that with Zodiac, but Zodiac is so like mysterious in almost a way. Like it's so distant. Like we know stuff about Zodiac, but so little. And we
right,
and I definitely agree with you that we need something as a ultimate villain of Final Fantasy 14, and
like I could
we've
see,
never had that.
I can see, like Xenos ultimately like taking over the Empire. You know, you know,
As
like
Elidibus
like
or as Xenos?
No, I think Elidibus is going to be killed off, and
Okay.
I think Xenos is going to get his body back,
Okay.
and then I think Xenos is going to be pissed at the Ascians, just like um, Gaius, and you know, I think ultimately what's going to happen is it's going to be Varys and or Xenos is probably going to overthrow Varys at some point, and then I think Xenos will be, um,
He
you
is
know,
the crown prince, so he is the next person to take the throne.
I think he's going to do some kind of crazy shit and try to take over Zodiark himself.
Right.
And then he's going to become like the aspect of Zodiark, and we're going to
Yeah.
have to kill him at
Yeah,
that
I could see
point.
that. I could see
So
that.
so you
Where
know,
he realizes the only way to have his whatever his proper I know he's crazy, so he's like his like he wants to become the vessel of Zodiark type of thing. Like he is the ultimate, like he is.
right? Because he's
I don't know
just
how to I don't know how to word it.
he's
Like
just straight
you
up
know,
crazy. That he's straight
yeah,
up crazy. That's all you
yeah.
need to know. You know, it's like I said, he's like the Sephiroth of 14, and Zodiark is like his Genova in a way,
Do
kind of thing.
do you think he actually knows about the Asians though in general?
I don't think he's quite there yet, but
So
I think he's starting to understand. Like his whole once his body was taken over by Elidibus, I think he's kind of realizing, you know, hey, there's some weird shit happening here, you
hmm.
know.
I just
Obviously.
they've not really properly shown him even interacting with the Asians really, besides someone taking over his body. I wonder if he really will get to the Gaius level. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think possibly he'll probably clash with Gaius at some point as
Right.
well. I'm really interested to see what they're gonna do with Gaius's character, because he's
I
kind of an unknown for me. Like I'm not really sure where they're going with him right now.
I think they're positioning him to be the one that eventually takes over the Garlean Empire because I think that the Gaius is just going. I know that sounds like super cliche and it looks how it might be, but it's like that's almost how they've done it every single step of the way. Like we always have this one character that like either they redeem themselves or they become more significant or they're somehow significant to the story and they become the figure of the of whatever like city state that we associate with, right? And I think Gaius is more positioned to be like that because he's always been like kind of the symbol of the empire, but he's also been fairly reasonable as a character. Like he's never been this like evil. I think he's always been like a countryman. Like he's very like devoted to his country and uh, but he knows that in this case, I think that there's something wrong with it, and he's going to try and fix his own country by killing the Asians since they're meddling with it. I don't think he actually knows that it's as deep as it is because from my understanding, Solus was actually his mentor, and he and I think that's going to actually enrage him more
Right.
of trying to like take back the empire from the Asians kind of thing, and that either I just don't see of anyone else who could do it currently of the cast of characters in the game to kind of eventually at some point be that character. And
Right.
he's like I said, he's always been symbolized as the main Garlean since 1.0 kind of thing.
So, what was your impression of the whole Gaius reveal? By the way, do you think, um, do you
I think
what was your impression of his character at that point? Like, do you think they changed his character too much, or you know,
I
did it seem fitting to you, his
I think
reaction?
I think he never actually had a problem with the Warrior Light. He the Warrior Light or the characters that are involved in the scenario. He never had a problem with that. He was always like I said. He's the countryman. He was loyal to his country, and he was just doing what he needed to do to take over the country. The For his country to take over or subjugate Orzia because that was what he was brought up upon. So I don't think he has like this personal vendetta outside of the case of the Asians because they literally have fucked everything up for him.
Right.
Sorry for my language, by the
No,
way. I
no,
didn't
no,
know
no, no.
if you need to believe that.
No, it's fine. It's fine. Yeah, my I mean, my initial reaction when I watched that scene was just that they completely, altered his persona.
Mm,
Like I felt like, he was kind of this, like villain guy, and he was, he always sort of seemed like he was kind of like self-righteous in a way. Like his way was the only way to save Eorzea, and he knew what he was doing, and he kind of had this like sort of determination about him, right?
mhm.
And like you would think after the whole realizing that the Asians had played him the whole time, and everything in 2.0 was kind of a lie, and you know, um, realizing that he's been hunting the Asians, for revenge. Like he just didn't seem very um, upset to me. Like he didn't seem like he had too much emotion. Like he was
I don't
just sort of
think he.
like um like he wanted to like he was out for revenge, but he seemed like he was like didn't really care too much, like he was just like, yeah, I'm gonna kill those fuckers, but you know
I I think that's just his demeanor though, because I don't remember him having that much emotion in 2.0 or 1.0.
like I just expected him to be more angry, you know what I
Hmm.
mean? And he was just pretty calm about everything.
I think that's just his personality and how they want to portray him. He's not this because I don't think he's crazy in the sense of like where he's going to he he seems very like, okay, you screwed me over, now I'm gonna come after you kind of thing. Like
Right,
that's like it's just that's it. Like there's nothing more to it. Like he's just very almost blunt in a way.
right.
Like I don't want to say he's I just don't think he's that emotional of a character, so it's very difficult for me to and maybe then the expansion because I don't there's no way he's getting killed off pre the expansion, or I don't believe there's any way he's getting killed off pre expansion. That maybe
No.
he'll show more emotion then. Uh, maybe it's just
Like me
I just don't think that's his
personally,
character.
I feel like honestly, like I don't think they ever originally intended for Gaius to come back to life. I think they just kind of wanted to kill him off because he was like a
Mhm.
remnant of 1.0 kind of thing, and they wanted to like get rid of him so they could do their own story. But then over the years, people, you know, would talk about Gaius, and they came to realize that he had a pretty big fan following. Like he was a
Mhm.
popular character, and that for that reason they decided to bring him back, and sort of so his whole like story arc right now is like a big retcon. You know what I mean? So
Mm.
I feel like maybe like his whole persona change is like not really um wasn't really planned, you know what I mean? So it's kind of like awkward. So
So I that could definitely be the case. I guess I have suspicions of that being the case because unless in Final Fantasy, unless someone you actually see them die and they are like somehow very, very visibly dead, like Harshafant, right?
right.
Or or uh, uh,
Well, let me
Ice
tell
Heart.
you let me
Like I
tell you
think
my
that's
rule.
where
My
I
Okay, so
question that.
here's how you know they're really dead, because in Final Fantasy 14, when someone's really dead, that person is in the ground and they have a freaking grave marker,
Yeah,
and you go to their funeral and they're dead.
yeah, yeah.
So,
Or they appear in Palace of the Dead because
right.
dead people show up there.
Right. But anybody, if you didn't have a funeral for them, then that motherfucker's out there. So,
Yeah. So that's why that's personally why I think he's that I don't know if this is necessarily the envisionment of how they were going to utilize him. I just don't think they planned for him to actually die in those events. Um, I don't know if you see the image of. I think it's hilarious. It's like man, literally too angry to die.
Right. I mean, that's pretty much how it goes. Like the dialogue in the story is like, well, I thought about dying, but then I decided I would not die.
Exactly.
You know, like he's just like, no, yeah, I think I'll just stay alive today.
Yeah.
So, so yeah, I definitely I definitely get that feeling like it was definitely a retcon, and so
Possibility.
but with 5.0 they're definitely gonna expand on his character, and hopefully they'll do some hopefully some good writing with him, because he actually, I am one of those guys fanboys, so I am rooting for him to have a good story, and you
I
know for his
I do
character
want
arc to be good.
I do want to say I also think that that cutscene maybe wasn't so like dramatic or anything either, because that's the tone that they wanted for it, because uh I think everyone knew it was Gaius.
Right,
So
right.
it's just like because of this massive assumption, like, yeah, guys, you got me. I'm Gaius.
Yeah. Right, right. Yeah, it wasn't that big of a surprise. So,
Right.
um, you know, eh, I guess too, part of it that's hard for me. Like, I'm trying to figure out, is it the same voice actor as before, or is it a different voice actor? Because
I,
like you can't tell, because he had that his helmet on all the time before,
right.
and
I,
that changed his voice. So I keep like listening, you know, like trying to see if it's like the same, and I
I
kind of
think it's
think it is, but I can't really tell.
I think it's really hard to say, but I've heard a lot of people say it is, and I haven't heard anyone say it isn't. Um, I I think it's gonna be one of those cases where you have to wait until the end credits. So like we'll have the end credits in at the next patch for like this expansion,
Hmm.
and we can see. It's hard to tell. I don't personally know. I honestly don't keep up with the voice actors too much. I do know there was a drastic change though between like 2.0 to Heavensward. So that was like the only daunting like change I ever saw, and that was like Elphinode's voice changed, and like a lot of some of the Scions I think voices changed. Like, but I it's hard for me to tell until I know voice actor and matchup type thing, and someone will check it. I guess I don't mind so much because he did have the voice changer. It's difficult to say it was that big of a deal if even if they did change the voice actor, you know.
Right, right. So, so yeah, definitely looking forward to more Gaius in 5.0
Mhm.
as well, and we'll have to see, what his arc ends up being.
Will
Um,
he get his armor back at some point is the question.
yeah,
Because I think that's probably I think he's the most signature at that armor is the most signature like Garlean personally.
yeah.
So I'd like to see that again.
Well,
Like
I'm
that
curious to
versus
see
Xenos.
his interactions with like Sid and Nero as well.
Yeah.
To see, because Nero has kind of changed a lot, so I think he would kind of be shocked to see Gaius alive again. You know what I mean?
See, I think that's the main problem here is that a lot of time like the way they portray these characters is like they're a lot of they're relatable and understanding characters that grow on you, and that's why they needed Xeno almost is like because he's so crazy and all this kind of stuff. It's like you don't want to have that relatable character that you can associate with and like that you can come to enjoy even though they're the bad guy. And like Nero and Gaius are now converting over to good guys in our mind in a way, right?
Right,
So it's they have to replace the bad guy with an even badder guy
right,
every time,
right.
and then the bad guy becomes our friend.
Well, I think it's that, and I think it's also a little bit of the whole, um, like Final Fantasy trope of, well, no one's really bad and no one's really good, and
Yeah, that too.
it's all just a matter of perspective kind of thing, you know.
Yep.
So, um, I think you're gonna see good guys becoming bad guys and bad guys becoming good guys, and you know,
Have we have we had a good
especially
guy become a bad guy yet?
um, not yet, but we are turning into the Warrior of Darkness in 5.0,
We
so
are the bad guy.
right, so
Maybe Thor. What I don't know the actual guy, but the guy who turned into Thoradin that was like the priest or whatever of the Archbishop of Ishgard. Maybe he foresaw the future when he saw that like dark version of us at the end of the 3.0 main MSQ.
right,
That was the true version. We are the bad guy.
right. So anyways, so I think we've covered the story pretty well. I
Hmm.
don't think there's a whole lot more we can really touch on. We could talk about the Four Lords story a little bit, but there's not really a whole lot to talk about there.
Yeah, I'm kind of disappointed with that.
Yeah, me too. I kind of thought the whole ending was kind of a cop out personally, but
I really think we should have it at least like a solo instance versus Koryu and not the same model as Kieran.
yeah, it felt really cheap, didn't it? You know.
It just seemed like an afterthought almost. Like they had this story that they were building and then they just like it kind of fell flat on its face.
Yeah, they're like, oh yeah, what were we doing with this statue thing again? Oh,
Yeah.
just throw Kieran Mount in there. Uh,
Well, so the Kieran mount here. The thing is, this is based on Final Fantasy 11, right? So Kieran is one of the like Sky. Like, so there's like this place called Sky, or like that's the nickname by players. I don't remember its actual like real name in Final Fantasy 11. It's and that comes like from a I think it's a Chinese like story or something, and that's where the Four Lords is based on. But Kieran is the final boss out of killing all of Genbu, Siryu, Suzaku, and Byako from Final Fantasy 11. You like gather these items and then you summon Kieran, so it
right,
made sense. Like that Kieran was the last thing, but in Final Fantasy 11, he was a Manicore type mob. So like
right,
we've already had the Manicore type mob in this game, but like it would have if they were trying to play to Final Fantasy 11, they would have made a little bit different of a model, I think, than just reusing Kieran. But I think because that thing was called Kieran, that was why they did it. That's why I think Kieran in like the actual lore of like the Chinese lore, or maybe it's some Asian lore, that
like,
that is a horse, I
right.
guess.
Yeah, it's like a horse dragon monster thing. Yeah.
Yeah,
So yeah, I guess it makes sense in that aspect of it, but it still just didn't
it seemed
feel good.
lazy.
Yeah, it just didn't feel good. So, um, and I was disappointed that it wasn't at least like a solo instance where
Yep.
you it could have been a lot more epic where you're teaming up with the Four Lords and you're actually like in combat and maybe there's like a duty action where you could like use the Four Lords powers and shit.
Yeah,
But
and then maybe that's what they were originally going for, and they just didn't have time to make it. Like that might have been what it is. It's because like that might not have been enough. Like they had that plan, but they just didn't end up getting to execute it or something. Maybe they fell flat on your resources, or they spent too much resources on Yuri,
yeah, maybe.
or they I feel like it would have fit well like it you fight along the Four Lords, you have some type of intermission where like you're almost being defeated and then Tenzin shows up and does something and stops it. And then you're fighting with Tenzin and the Four Lords all together and then something happens and then you right. So
Right,
like it because like I think it was expected kind of to a degree also Tenzin shows back up, you know.
right, right. Yeah. So,
But yeah.
but yeah, overall, I think they could have done more with it, and but but yeah, so I don't think there's a whole lot of story like lore we really gained from it. I mean, I thought it was kind of interesting to see the fact that like Soroban and Genbu kind of like fused in a way.
Yeah.
So that was
I
sort of interesting. Maybe like there could be implications of that happening,
I
like
think that was always being built upon. That he was always being trained with along the storyline. I mean, that's kind of what the whole entire I think theme was there is like Soroban was going to become Ganbu and like beyond just the Koryu stuff. Uh, I I think that was kind of envisioned to a degree for a really long time,
right,
and that's just how they ended up executing.
right.
Uh,
So I mean, like I always try to look for like grander story implications when they do stuff like that,
mhm.
because we've seen like, people switching bodies and like, people like having primals inhabit their bodies and stuff like that, but we've never seen like two entities inhabiting the same body at once. So I thought that
Mm.
was kind of interesting to see that, and I
No,
wonder.
we have right because of La Brea and uh, um, La Brea and
And Thancred, right? But
isn't that it, wouldn't you consider that a case?
right, but in that case, La
Or
Habrea had kind of like taken over Thancred, you know what I mean?
or
And
like
Thancred wasn't really like present, you know what I mean?
I guess I the Nidhogg and Estinian situation because Estinian was at one point like kind of fighting it in a way, right?
Yeah, I guess that could kind of be similar. Yeah, so yeah, I guess you're right. That does um, sort of
I think it is a little different in this case because it's almost like it was like Soroban sacrificed himself to like some like in a way to like bring a god back, which is like kind of like or he kind of made a primal come back in a way
yeah,
like and so he kind of became a little bit different than Shiva in a way. If you want to think about it in those terms, like he's a little bit different than Iceheart because Genbu is still within him.
right,
But I guess that's where I think there's a few different parallels and cases that are very similar. You know.
right, right. So so yeah, um, so there's a little bit of lore there. I'll be interested to see if any of that gets used later on.
Yeah.
Um, So, anyways, I think the last thing we can really talk about is that we haven't touched on is Blue Mage. So
Yep.
how was your Blue Mage experience been so far?
So I enjoyed it at first, like the leveling and initially getting all the spells and all everything, like from like world mobs and like some of the easier dungeons and stuff like that. But once I started hitting some areas where there's like the rank 4 spells and rank 5 spells, it's gotten a little grindy and stale. I like the Mass Carnival concept, um, but it's very short lived, I want to say.
Right,
Um,
people are doing what people always do in Final Fantasy 14. They're speed running to the end of the content as fast as possible, and then realizing that there's nothing to do.
yeah, I mean, that's pretty much what's happened to me. So I literally had 50 in an hour and a half because of we ended up using one of our additional characters just power level us, and it we I always thought like the leveling aspect of it wasn't really that important. It was more of the spell learning, and I actually wish they had just made EXP tied or the level tied to learning spells as opposed like so like every spell gains you like a significant amount of EXP so that encourages you to learn the spells as opposed to like going out and killing monsters the way they did. Um,
Well,
I don't know.
you do actually get a little bit of experience when you learn a spell. It's not a lot, but
You do?
yeah,
I never learned it. The thing is I never learned a spell, so maybe that's why I didn't know that. But I
yeah,
felt like that should have been more significant than if that was the case. You
yeah,
know what I mean?
yeah. It's not a lot of experience, especially
Okay.
compared to like what you can get, um, just from grinding out in the field and stuff. Because
Hmm.
you'll be getting like, if you're doing like the optimal strats of like, using your 1,000 needles to kill stuff that's like 10 levels higher than you or whatever,
Yeah.
You know, you're getting like, you know, 12, 15K experience a mob, whereas I think the spells would give you like 6K or something like that, depending on like what level it was or whatever.
Yeah.
Um,
I think my primary issue though right now, I don't mind that the content was short lived in like the way I had it. Um, I do not like the level of RNG for the primal spells. I think it's too much. Even for me, I just for this type of content, I don't think they should do this the way they are for primals. One, because they it takes a long time to kill the primal compared to killing an outworldly mob. So basically what they did is they made it so like the lower rank spells, which a lot of those come from the outdoor mobs, are very easy to get, and then the higher ranking ones are very difficult to get, and they have a lot more RNG to them, and
right.
that's the primals, and you end up having to do this long process multiple times. And I know this is to keep people playing, but I would much rather of them put those high RNG things on something like a outside mob where you can grind them and do that, because I don't know, that seems a little, it also seems awkward that you're learning it from primal, because I feel like that's something that should have came from a first summoner. Like I feel like they kind of gyp summoners in this way, because the primals are like summons in the games. So why is the summoner not getting these spells and not and the blue mage, and why is the blue mage getting these spells and the summoners not? Like,
Right.
it's almost taking like the signature aspect of this character class, and they're like confusing it, because I don't know. I'm there's
I
some
mean,
things
I
about
get
blue mage I like, and there's some things I don't like, and
right,
that's one of the things that's like kind of confusing to me, I guess.
right. Like they almost make it seem like the spell itself is like a drop from the primal, like as in
Yeah.
like as in a mount or something.
Yes, exactly.
It shouldn't be like that because the mount is like a cosmetic reward, you know what I mean? Whereas the
Yep.
spell is central to the job itself, you know what I mean?
Yes.
So it should be somewhat of a challenge to learn all the spells, but it shouldn't be random, you know what I mean? Like
And I
I think for primal specifically that like you said the drop rate should be a lot higher, like almost to the point where it's guaranteed because it shouldn't be like, you know, um, it shouldn't be like you're locked out of that spell. You know what I mean?
y- yeah. I think what the main thing they really need to do, and is like almost like a scaling RNG. So like you see the move once and you have a percentage chance of learning it, and then you kill that mob. Then it increments your RNG. So like say like 1 out of 50 is your initial RNG on a primal, and then the second time you see the ability, it's 2 out of 50, so it's 1 in 25, and then it's gradually getting closer and closer to 50 out of 50. So eventually you either get lucky or you hit 50 times of doing this thing, and it seems a little ridiculous because like yesterday, I was spamming Ramu and I think we killed it 35 times and it never gave the ability. And
Right.
that's insane to me. Like, because each Ramu fight takes 2 minutes, and if you and
Well,
on top of like the duration of getting it set back up and all this kind of stuff, it's just like, ugh.
see, one idea I had that I thought would be interesting because I was thinking as I was leveling up Blue Mage, you know, I
Mhm.
noticed that you can't actually use a limit break as a Blue Mage, right? Like
Right.
it just doesn't let you do it. And I thought, you know, well, that's silly. Why can't they just do the regular like Black Mage limit break, you know?
I actually
And
thought that was what it was going to be, because people are like, I was like streaming it on Twitch, and people are like, "Oh, what does Blue Mage have a limit break?" And I'm like, "Oh, I don't know. Like, let me see if I can grab it." I grabbed it out of my UI bar, and it was there. Like, you have access to it in the sense of you can put it on your UI bar, but
it just doesn't do
it's
anything.
just not used right.
So I thought, you know, it might be cool to have their limit break be some kind of action that makes it 100% to learn the spells. You know what I mean?
Ah,
So like when you're in a group and you're doing those primals, you know, the strat will be basically build up limit break and then limit break the boss, and then that'll let you 100% learn the spell.
so like a 3 bar limit break is 100%, but like maybe like a single limit break is like a lower percent, and like a 2 limit break is like a different percent, and all that kind of stuff.
Right, right.
Yeah, I mean that's understandable, and that gives you incentive to be more in the fight longer.
Right. And I just remember back to like older Final Fantasy games that had Blue Mage where it
Mm.
was usually like you had to you
Just
had to
hit it.
like weaken the enemy, like get its HP down and then use a certain ability on it, and then that ability would
Hmm.
finish off the enemy, and then you would learn the spell. You know what I mean?
I I don't. I think Final Fantasy V would have been the one that had that, right?
I possibly the one I'm actually thinking of is Final Fantasy IX with Quina, where you had to eat the
Uh,
enemy. You know?
I don't remember. I don't see. See, that's the thing is I didn't use Quina that much, and I don't think I ever like learned all the spells in Final Fantasy IX for Blue Mage. So it's been so long.
Yeah, man, that's a shame because the Blue Mage spells were so fucking OP in nine. Like Quina would just wreck everything, man. Like you could do so much crazy shit with him. I loved leveling him up, man, or her
I'm
or whatever.
I that thing. uh, I used I think I mostly used Steiner, Freya, Zidane, and it was either I want to say it was Garnet, but I don't.
You gotta give it a try with Quina, man. Let me tell you.
I mostly my like blue mage like enthusiasm comes from Final Fantasy 11 because I personally feel that's the absolute definitive MMO version of blue mage. Like I don't think you can possibly ever top this thing. Like
Yeah,
they nailed it. Like I give so much props to whoever came up with Blue Mage in Final Fantasy 11. I think it is amazing. Like there is over 100 spells. You you can you can combo them. You can uh
yeah. I remember
you
it
can
was
just do
awesome.
so much.
Being
Like
able to do like your own darkness and light
yeah,
skill
yeah, yeah,
chains,
yeah,
and you could like magic burst with yourself and stuff.
yeah.
Yeah,
I just I feel like it was the perfect like combination of like the MMO mechanics of that game, or like the mechanics of that game mixture with how Blue Mage got implemented. They just I personally feel they did it right.
right.
And um
And
I
that's one of the
and I like the
complaints
aesthetics too.
that I've heard as well about Blue Mage is, they said it's going to be this solo content that it's not going to be max level, but you can do like all this old stuff and be like super OP, right? But
Mm,
but what's come to find out is you're actually not that OP because you know a lot of the skills that should enable you to be OP just um,
aren't usable on it.
they just resist it. You can't
Yep.
even use those skills. So it's like
So
all the like half the fun of what Blue Mage was supposed to be just isn't even there. Like you just can't
yeah,
do it. You
the
know.
way like how you're saying they made this to be out this solo class, and all of a sudden like you can't here's the other thing, mechanics in this game do not aid well to that. So if I'm the great thing about I'm going to use parallels to Final Fantasy 11 a lot with this. In Final Fantasy 11, the bosses mostly didn't have enrages, or they didn't have some mechanic that required you have such and such amount of people. So you could have these like long endurance battles as a solo player if you knew how to utilize your job properly. So red mages would often solo a lot of things because they would do red mage sub ninja, and they could just like either bind and keep the big moss bob and just slowly like, deteriorate it away. And the same thing kind of went for blue mages. You could as a blue mage, you could overcome something just by being skilled and having all this gear and stuff, and like not just like murdering it the way like if you go into like a level synced area and in 14, you can just murder it and avoid mechanics because you're killing it so quickly. Well, that's not the case for this blue mage. Like you can't just like go after this like content because they have enrages or they have some mechanic that like prevents you from doing it. For example, like I think the only boss that you can actually kill that's high level content that at level 50 as blue mage is T2 because of the type of enrage mechanic that it has. It's like it just gradually hits you damage over time, and it doesn't one shot you.
It's a soft
so like
enrage. It's not a hard
right
enrage that you just die.
right. So like with Twintanya, for example, you can't go and kill Twintanya, one because of conflagration, two because if you did it actually make it to the end, you have the dreadnoughts which paralyze you and you can't do anything about it, and then they will come and one shot you, or you have, if you somehow could get past that phase, you have the end in rage of where she just like kills you. So they've designed all this content around this party play, and they do not allow you, unless you just can do enough damage to just significantly overwhelm the boss, which you can on blue mage. It just doesn't aid well to solo content, and the same thing goes for every single extreme primal, every single fight. It's just
right.
It's very sorry. I get very ranty on this because it's like I want so much for this class because I really enjoy the concept of it, and I wish they could. I wish they had some way of making it possible for this to be soloable without overwhelming it as a level 70 kind of thing in this kind of content. Like, because I could go as a level 70 samurai and just murder Twintanya kind of thing. And
right. I think if they really want, if they really want to make it solo content, like they really need to drive that home and
yeah.
build onto that, like if we're not going to be max level, if we're not going to be doing current raids and we're just going to be doing old content that nobody cares about, then then let us be overpowered and give us those skills that'll just completely overwhelm encounters, because that's fun, right? Like, so what if it's easy or whatever, it's old content, right? Who cares?
Right, exactly.
So so just, I think they need to give us a little, like, because people loved the Logos actions in Eureka, right?
Yeah,
just some of the completely OP combos you could do, like with like reflect and that kind of stuff, and the boosts and all of that. So so that, I think, is what they need to bring to Blue Mage. Just give us like super OP stuff that we can go into old content and just annihilate it. And then maybe put in some kind of new achievements for like soloing content, to give Blue Mage that extra reason to even do this stuff. You know what I mean?
So I think where they screwed up is they didn't give Blue Mage a level 60 unlock or cap, and they didn't allow Blue Mage to go into Palace of the Dead because Palace of the Dead is designed for this. This is literally what Palace of the Dead is designed for, and I just don't understand why we can't take it up to level 60. There's no reason for this. Like, if you want everlasting content, you don't even need the Mass Carnival. Like, the Mass Carnival, I feel, is like I like the Mass Carnival. First of all, I haven't gotten to that, talking about that, but I feel like if we could have done Palace of the Dead, that gives a massive incentive, because if people do that on Red Mage, make it so another job can do it. Make it so the solo job that's designed to be a solo job has content that it actually can go in and solo. And people like have a challenge to, like, I want to be like, I want to be a solo player in Palace of the Dead, and I can get stuff from it. Like, you can get glamour, you can get the mount, you can get the title, you can get the achievement, you can get on the leaderboard that's for Palace of the Dead. Like, there's all these like kind of things, and
right, it's content that's already there that
and they don't have to do any more work.
Right. And it would be more stuff for Blue Mage to do. So
yeah, exactly. And so when that happens, and if they allow Palace of the Dead, that's great. But with this content lull up until the expansion, this was the perfect time to give it, and I'm kind of disappointed they didn't.
Right. So, I mean, I'm sure they're aware that there's demand for people
Yeah.
to want to bring Blue Mage into Palace of the Dead. So
Oh
my
yeah, for
my
sure.
hope is that, they're working on that, and once they do raise the cap to 60, that's just going to be a thing,
I
and
just think it was a
we
little bit
won't.
of a miscalculation on their part at
Right.
their timing or their what they made available. And maybe that's just due to the fact they wanted to get this thing out and they wanted to test it. But
Right.
um, I think the demand's there. I definitely think the demand's there, and I hope they do, I hope that people don't like get bored with it in the sense of like, yes, right now it's like there's going to be an endpoint right now, but I think there's not, if once you get this additional stuff that you can do with it, it it has content that it's going to be useful for,
Right.
and
I
people
think
can enjoy it with.
right now it's just primarily balanced as something to go with the Mass Carnival. Like Mass
Yeah.
Carnival is like the Blue Mage content. So
Yep.
everything you do with Blue Mage is aimed at that Mass Carnival. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So, and I think that's fine, but um, I think the whole um, thing about Blue Mage being like a job at all is kind of making people want to go outside of that and do it. Use Blue Mage in regular content as well, and that's sort of where I think a lot of the complaints are coming from. Is people want this to be a real job, and it just isn't. You know what I mean?
I, and the nice part about it is the glamour's nice,
Yeah. Well,
and the
and
additional emotes are
again,
nice.
I'll be honest with you. Like that's the whole reason why I do content in this game is for
Right.
glamour. So I wanted that Blue Mage outfit, man.
They don't have enough canes though.
Right, right, right. Um, I was disappointed by that too. Like I was hoping we were gonna get like some primal canes
Yeah,
and stuff, and
I
like
agree.
some like
They need like
dreadworm,
dread
yeah,
worm, all the yep.
right. And no, we didn't get none of that. So um, hopefully it's coming, but we'll have to wait and see. Um, so have you done any of the mass carnivals at all? Have you finished
I
it or?
I've done the number 25. I did it the very first day as soon as I possibly could. And I liked it. I've touched one of the other ones. I just didn't beat it because I was rushed on time. It's just I haven't had a lot of time. I took the day off on Blue Mage Day to just kind of like do as much as possible. But I guess I've held off too much on the Mass Carnival because I want to get all the spells first. And
Right.
I wanted to kind of do that number 25 when I saw that it was available right off the bat just to see. Because that was I just was curious, can I beat it with what I have available? And sure enough, I could.
Right.
But I've seen a few like little videos of people doing some interesting stuff in there, but I want to get all my abilities, like I said, before I do too much more of it.
I
I
think that's kind of like the main fun factor of Blue Mage is just collecting all the spells, and then
yeah,
the Mass Carnival is just sort of like challenge mode or whatever. But
yeah,
I do kind of enjoy the fact that the encounters are not just like DPS down these mobs as fast as you can.
yes,
There's sort of like a strategy to it.
yep.
Like it's almost like a puzzle mode, like
Mhm.
encounter kind of thing, which I think is cool. Like I remember I did one where like the enemies were like positioned behind like a square and they all did like look away mechanics, and you had to like line of sight them around the square while you killed like some other stuff on the other side. So
Yeah,
that kind of stuff, like knowing like figuring out positionals to where you can avoid certain things while doing something else, and then also having to like slot certain skills to be able to um, hit like enemies in a line or whatever, like around an
yeah.
object is kind of cool. I think that stuff is nice. Um,
I think they're being very creative with this content, which is a good thing. It's different from their other content. So, from what I know about it, I don't want to spoil. I don't really want to spoil too much of myself on that, and I don't mind talking about it. From what I've read and seen, I want to try and kind of do it. It they're stretching their creative muscle a little bit more than sometimes they do on some other pieces of content, where it's much more like this is a DBS check, this is a generic MMO thing. They're doing a little bit more here.
yep. And I think what they like to do, Square Enix likes to do, is they like to use side content as like testing grounds for main content. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? So I can see this becoming like a way for them to test like raid mechanics. You know what I mean?
potentially, yes. I
So
I don't know so much about the elemental stuff, or like and that kind of stuff. Like there are some stuff. There's things like the reflection, or like the stones, the preventing damage from a particular source that they have kind of had in the game for a while. Like in the original Binding Coil, one of the fights actually made it so you had to use magic damage on a specific thing, or physical damage. And I think there's some other cases throughout fights that they've done that kind of thing, specifically with number 25. And I don't know if they can incorporate that too much, because then it makes like this situation where you have to bring specific jobs. But I I do know there's other stuff in there that I think is where they can experiment more. How you're saying, I'm curious to see what they do with more abilities once we get level 60 unlocked. If they add more Mass Carnival and they're creative with that as well, and that's
right,
where the experimenting kind of comes in.
right.
But I definitely agree that this is kind of like a testing ground content wise, and I'm actually curious what they'll do with the other limited jobs when they eventually do bring them out with this type of content. Like I highly suspect that Beastmaster is going to be Pokemon.
Oh yeah, for sure. You'll go around the world and there'll be like a bestiary where it has all the monsters and it'll
Yeah.
just say go catch them all, you know.
Yep.
And then hopefully, you'll just be able to like summon all the ones you've caught
Yep.
to use and you won't have to like go catch them every time.
Yep.
Um,
And that's what I suspect out of that content for like the Mass Carnival equipment. It's like you go to the arena and fight your beasts with either. Well, they need to make it so it's player. You can fight against other players too if they end up doing that, but also come up with like stuff like this where like you need to use particular monsters to fight
yeah,
each other or something like that.
yeah. Yeah, FF11 had a system like that.
The Pinkerton.
Yeah. I briefly dabbled
Pancration.
in it in my years of playing FF11.
I did as well. I don't know why, but it was there and I did it, and
Right,
it was interesting at the time.
right.
I had a Nakapalu that had that attacked very quickly, like almost 100 fists, and it would petrify the other mob, so they wouldn't be able to do anything. It was kind of entertaining. But there's Chigos who did something similar, and they'd attack like really quickly, and then petrify me before I could do anything. Or like there's the Dark Elementals who couldn't like be affected by status ailments or something. Like there's a bunch of different stuff people did, and it was kind of amusing, but it was also really weird content for 11.
Right, right. So yeah. So yeah, I mean, I've had fun playing Blue Mage so far. I think, it's definitely a good starting place, but they do need to make some improvements and some adjustments, and we'll see what kind of changes they make down the line.
Yeah,
Um,
I just hope that if they get bad feedback of people being upset, that it's kind of going to get stale really quickly, as it's not a show of disinterest, it's a
yeah.
desire for more.
I think people just need to accept that it's not going to be a real job. just just stop with that. They're not going to do it. It's a limited
Yeah.
job. That's the concept they're going with, and they're not going to back off of that. I think people just need to give feedback on to the extent of what the content actually is, and that's you know, it's side content, guys. It's never gonna do in-game raids. You're never gonna do Savage with it, you know. So I think people just need to let that go, personally. But
See, I don't. I actually. I don't. I don't think there's anything stopping them though from doing that. Personally, like I think they could eventually like. I'm not for some person holding out for it, but I think they could always come up with a way to make it so it's what it is right now, along with giving it to people that do want to use it in raids.
I mean,
And
I agree that they could do it, but
will they do it though?
my
Is probably
opinion
more
is that it's so far out of what their intentions are that they would have
likely.
to like change their development plans to do that, and I don't think that's a good idea. Like I think, you know, I
I
don't
will.
want them to like waste time trying to make this job and
Right.
just to like appease people's complaints, you know what I mean? I'd ra-
Right, and I understand that. I guess what I'm saying is like I'm in my head. I imagine that they with the two next jobs they're going to add, which we suspect is probably it's going to be gun blade something something, and it's a healer probably most likely because they haven't added a healer along in a while, and everyone's assuming that the gunblade thing's a tank. Because I think I'm adding another DPS is a little too much, but I could be wrong. But I think there's a lot of people on the field or saying that it's gonna be tank and healer, and um, I I suspect when they go to add more DPS, unless they want to become creative, I don't know where they're gonna pull from for actual like jobs at this point if they're going to go with signature Final Fantasy jobs. Like they almost need to like repurpose Blue Mage again and allow it to be have an additional way of playing it almost
right,
is because they're going to eventually run out of jobs. That's all more I'm getting at is unless like I said they get creative.
right. Well,
So
I'm sure they'll come up with something else, you know.
right. And
Um,
I could like I said I could be wrong, but I have a suspicion that it eventually will be usable. It just not in the way it currently is. It'll be have like a two like a branch off type thing where it's like this is the actual content version versus like this is the solo version kind of thing, or they could call it two different things. I don't know. It's
right.
just I have some suspicions personally.
See, my hope is, like I said, that they really push on like the OP soloing aspect
Yeah,
of it,
of
so
course.
that you can use it to go back and do old content and like farm things that you didn't necessarily
Yeah,
farm the first time through. Like use it as a way of like going back and getting all your old primal mounts that you never got. You know what I mean?
definitely.
So you don't have to like do unsync farms and stuff. You can just solo everything you need from old content
Right.
with limited jobs. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think that's what they should do with them. I just like I said, with this particular one, I could see them reutilizing it as more what I all I
Hmm. So I think we pretty much touched on everything in the patch. Um, is there anything that you think we missed that you want to go back over? We didn't really talk about the new G post stuff at all. Did you do any? Have you checked it out? Have you taken any
I've
new
I
screenshots lately? Or
I've not really taken screenshots for outside of the purpose of if I'm promoting something like I took the Blue Mage screenshot.
hmm
I have gone into GPOs and checked it out just to see it. I haven't had time to really go forward too much with it. The emote thing is nice. I That's the major thing. The depth of field I don't really care about personally because I'm going to use reshade personally.
yeah,
I think it's nice for people who don't have access to reshade. It looks a lot better, but
right.
it's just I personally use reshade, so I'm going to continue utilizing that the depth of field from that.
Yeah, I mean I use reshade also, but I kind of just use it as like a default setting to
Hmm.
so I don't have to like mess with a lot of things.
Yeah,
And then I'll use like G pose to like add lighting and things like that, and like
yeah.
change the colors of things, and without having to like go in and manually like edit RGB values and reshade all the time. Like that's kind of a pain, you know. So like
I
it's
work in visual effects, so I understand a bit about how reshade works.
right,
So I actually like creating my own presets when I can, but lately I have been using other people's presets and just kind of modifying them.
right.
Um, it's just more of a time thing. And like I said, I used to create my own presets, but and it's just because I have a little bit of a knowledge background there. Um, yeah.
Yeah, I mean I enjoy messing around with it too, but I find that just for general screenshot taking purposes, it's just simpler to use GPose to
Mhm.
just to make like minor modifications to things,
Right.
and you know, just to like get things in frame and things like that. So,
Yeah,
and then
definitely.
there's also like, you know, the cool little borders and stuff that they put in there, and stuff like that. So, but yeah,
Have they added new borders recently? I didn't
um
see any new ones.
I don't think so.
It's
Um,
it's that's one of the weird things I just never have really used that much. Like I think the only one I've used is like the almost like a it's like a Polaroid almost kind of looking.
oh yeah. There's that one. The one I like to use is the cinema frame that puts like
Yes, the
it
black
it
border.
gives you sort of like a wide angle kind of look to your picture, so
Yeah.
that can be pretty useful. Um, but yeah, like I use those sometimes, and then actually, what's really useful that I don't know if a lot of people know about is like some of the animation effects you can put on your character actually will speed up or slow down the frame rate of your character animation. So you can use, for example, the sleep animation will make all of your emotes go slower. So it makes it easier
Oh,
to
I didn't
um,
know
to capture emotes in certain frames. Because
that.
yeah, so what you can actually do is turn on the sleep animation, and it'll slow down the animation of whatever you're doing, and but it'll actually make your character look like they're asleep, so you don't necessarily want that. But you can you know, get your emote in frame and then turn off the sleep animation, and it'll go back to normal. So
I see.
you can use it to slow things down, and then turn it off so you don't get that sleep animation.
I
um,
didn't know that. That's good to know.
yeah, it's pretty handy. So yeah, like little tricks like that in G pose are nice. Um, and yeah, definitely the being able to change your emotes in G pose is really huge. Like, because before, you know, you would set up like your lighting positions and everything, and you know now they have like the weather snap, so you can keep the weather from changing. But you know, you would be like doing an emote or whatever, trying to get your picture, and then you decide, oh well, maybe I wanted to do this emote instead. So you had to like go out of G pose, choose a
Yeah.
different emote, and then once you got back in G pose, you had to reset up everything.
I
And
definitely think that's the biggest quality of life it
yeah,
possibly could have done.
so
The
now,
only problem is like if you have to rearrange like where people are standing and stuff, like if you have multiple characters.
right. So it's definitely a lot nicer now. So I'm glad they did that. Um, but yeah, so we've been talking here for a couple hours now. I think we pretty much touched on everything. So I think unless there's something else you want to mention, I think we're gonna wrap up the show here. Is
No, I think
there
we covered pretty much everything. Like we hit off the fashion report at the start, and then we went over the patch stuff.
right? So we got a lot of stuff in here. Um, so if there's any like shout outs or anything you want to do, I'll let you go ahead and tell people where they can find you at and all that stuff.
Pretty much if you look up Kaiyoko Star on anything like Twitter, Twitch, Reddit, or it's just Kaiyoko on Reddit, and those I think those are my primary places. You'll pretty much find me. I wanted to also thank like the Reddit community, obviously, that assists with the fashion report every single week. And then on those various sources, I always have the fashion report stuff go up outside of Twitch, I guess. The Twitch, I'm starting to get back into doing. I need to do a lot of modifications so I can like start streaming again proper. Because I haven't done it in so long. But yeah, if you want any fashion report stuff, or I think I'll probably do a little bit more Blue Mage content that I've been doing lately. And it'll be on my Twitter, and that's it.
All right, thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for being on the show. I appreciated having you.
Thank you for having me.
And as you guys know, I'm the host of the shows. That's Satsume Sunarashi from Sargatanis as well. You know, you can find me on Tumblr. I do post pictures there occasionally, and I'm also on Discord. So if you guys ever want to hit me up there, you can check out my Discord tag on the overlay. It's Satsume number 3784 on Discord, and you guys can message me anytime. So that's the show, guys. So thanks for stopping by. Thanks for watching the show, and we will catch you all next time. See you later. Bye, everybody.